I'm sure by now y'all have seen some Gran Turismo challenge videos. Whether it's like what Super GT has done in the past, of doing a whole heck of a heap of laps at Nürburgring, and others have tried since, or even just individual people's challenges of trying to complete the master licenses or certain circuit experiences or whatever it may be. A lot of people have had their own versions or variations of others' versions of Gran Turismo challenges. And overall, that is a great thing. It's always good to have something to compete and strive for, especially when people can put their own spin on classic things or even do their own thing. And I always interested in seeing what people can come up with. But y'all may have noticed that I've not really done any challenges and that sort of aspect. If I do quote unquote challenges, it's just miscellaneous jelly car, wheelie car, just fun stuff, and it's not really meant to be in a competitive level. Well, I've been thinking that all in all, my main challenge is kind of one of a kind from what I can tell. It's my long road throughout the years of getting from, well, I'll just say not even being able to compete online to A plus in the modern Gran Turismos while legally blind. As I said in the life story video, I have cerebral palsy and it affects my whole body to some degree, my legs quite a bit, and my eyes quite a lot. Even with glasses, my vision is 20 over 240. So, of what y'all can see from 240 feet away would be about what I'm seeing from 20 feet away. So, take that as you may, and that's with glasses. Legally blind is 20 over 200, so yeah, and that's definitely an issue, but where it's been that way my whole life, cerebral palsy is not a progressive thing, it's always the same. I can't really judge of how much of an actual issue it is, and that's one of the main reasons I've been fighting to get Gran Turismo in the Paralympics for a while now, and it's looking like it's going to be at the very least a while and a half right yonder before it would happen. But whatever, that's not necessarily the point. The main point is kind of just going over my journey from getting from the very beginning to now. I've somewhat done videos like this in the past, and then even one video specifically talking about the journey, but that was before saying that I have cerebral palsy and stuff, so this would be more of how that in and of itself actually affects the journey and all that. Well, overall, the challenge at the very beginning when I started playing video games, even, was that I've never really had all that good hand eye coordination because of the eye part. So I kind of got into racing games more because it's one button to accelerate, one button to brake, and one analog stick pretty much to turn. And for a lot of the time, that's pretty much the same basic things of how I do it now. Except in the old days, it was X and square for acceleration and brake. Now it's R2, L2, but pretty much the same basic thing. And that's kind of why I gravitated more towards racing games. There were less buttons to deal with, so I could do more coordination. Obviously, I've liked cars and all that too. I'd watch it on TV and stuff, so those worked hand in hand. But yeah, even from the very beginning, I picked up doing racing games more than the rest on average because those were just easier things to do. Gran Turismo, as I said even before Cerebral Palsy, I picked that because it just had a whole heck of a heap of cars and looked pretty for the time and stuff. I played GT3 like before I had a whole heck of a heap of cars, but I was aware that Gran Turismo 2 existed even then, although I didn't play it at that time, and I knew that it had a whole heck of a heap of cars, to say the least. So I kind of figured that, future Gran Turismos would have more cars, and I was right about that. I didn't really think much more into it at the time because I was a little kid, but yeah, I ended up being right. Hallelujah and such, I guess. But anyway, point being, that's why I was playing Gran Turismo specifically. But I still played a whole heck of a heap of other racing games too. Need for Speed, Midnight Club, MX versus ATV, Burnout, NASCAR a little bit later on. Quite a few. And then it extended then on of what racing games I play. But for Gran Turismo specifically, I mean, I kind of sucked, really. I got to around about 50% completion in Gran Turismo 4. I wasn't really talented enough to do the license test beyond that. And I could go back now and try it, but I mean, nowadays there's enough that you can do with modding it or just put it in the cheat code of the normal game and just get a whole heck of a heap of money, and you don't really have to worry about that. It's kind of pointless. But even to GT5 Prologue, I can't remember the exact spec disc that I got, because back then the discs had different specs. But nonetheless, I think it was pretty much the same for the license challenges, no matter the spec. But nonetheless, there were certain license challenges that I wasn't able to do at the time. Again, GT5 Prologue also had the cheat codes and stuff, so it wasn't that big of a deal. And those I found a lot quicker than the GT4 ones were, so whatever. I just did the cheat codes. But, I mean, even my dad was saying, if you can't figure out how to do the license test for the Prologue, then I'm not going to worry about getting you the game, because that was like right when the recession hit. And I said in my story, my dad was kind of, probably still is, an asshole, so yeah, there was that. But I mean, to be fair, that was right when the recession was too. But I mean, nonetheless, I probably played GT5 Prologue for hundreds of hours, and there was some stuff that I still couldn't even finish. Luckily, as I said, GT Academy was kind of a changing thing that ended up changing my dad's mind a bit, because, again, there was a former Bengals player that ended up being a host of that, so he was more on board for me getting the next one because of the Bengals player more than anything. So that was a lucky break there. But, yeah. And then, like, in 2018, I went back to play GT5 Prologue, and there was still some of the stuff I couldn't get gold on. So my driving in 2018 was well documented by that point. You can take my driving as you may by then, but again, the cheat codes and stuff, it wasn't that big deal. But then when GT5 happened, that was sort of the more of the big deal, because that was playing more. I did play a little bit of GT5 Prologue online. As I mentioned before, I basically just do Daytona and a lot of the more of the easy drafting type stuff. I didn't even really try any road courses and stuff. Then I'd just do. I think I've told this story before. There was a race at Daytona Oval of Nissan 370Z versus Skyline. I did that one and stuff like that. But GT5, the main game, is really when I got into online. Like the third day the game came out, I already started playing some online. I mean, as with Prologue, I did more at Daytona Oval and like Special Stage Route 7 and stuff like that. That was more full throttle, but I tried to do a little bit more into actually the curves and stuff. I mean, Route 7 had a little bit of curves and such. But, yeah, overall, I still sucked. I mean, I kind of figured out the general tuning of, like, for Daytona, when everything's full throttle, least downforce possible. And that was more than what a lot of people were doing at the very beginning of GT5. So, I mean, that got me some wins just from that, when everything was full throttle to do the least downforce, and then my tuning improved from there. But in terms of the total driving, I mean, early on in GT5, I still wasn't even the dandiest. I have told this story before. That was part of, remember, I said of the specific video, I did do that. And you can still go look on it. It's of the mygranturismo.net site. It actually has the rankings of the Gran Turismo 5 time and drift trials. There was a GT5 time trial early on when I was outside of the top 250,000. I don't think any time trial, even now where you're getting paid a whole heck of a heap to do them, would ever get to 250,000 people ever again. I don't know of, they don't get that many. And I was outside of the top 250,000. I'm not even 100% sure how many people were in the trial. But nonetheless, I was outside the top 250,000. I mean, you take that as you may. Is that the amount of people that were playing the game back then, or is that just how much I sucked back then? I'd say a combination of both. But yeah, you can go look at that, mygranturismo.net. I guess I'll try and find that one and link it in the description. But like I said, I have told that bit before, too. I was outside of the top 250,000. And I, at my best for all the time trials, because they gave credits, I would do my best to get the highest medal I could in it, if possible, gold. I would use the meta car, I would find a tune on GT Planet or whatever it may be, and go from there. Now, granted, not too long after that, there was a glitch to where you could use front wheel drive cars, and I have and others discussed this for well over 10 years now, where you could set the top speed to the front wheel drive cars like 36 or 38 miles an hour or whatever, and then you could drift with the e-brake and stuff like that, and that was the best way to drift for points back then. And I figured out that was like even by like 2012, sometimes in the top 10 in the world, and there was one in 2014 on GT6 where I finished second in the world and stuff. Yeah, I mean that was. Well, but that doesn't really correlate to the overarching trying to get my racing up, particularly. Although that did give me confidence just in that, oh, I could find some glitchy niche stuff, and then that kind of helped with some individual racing and stuff, because glitchy niche stuff. But GT5, I knew to not take the racing incredibly seriously, because even by like 2012, there was the glitchiness. There were people just downright using the hacked cars, and then there was actual glitches and rankings and stuff. Even some with GT Academy, where sometimes people could just sit on the start-finish line, and you could glitch it to where there were times that were like 0.01 seconds and stuff like that. GT5 wasn't the dandiest to downright focus on, and that was kind of everybody's general consent, unless they were really trying for GT Academy. There wasn't all that much incentive to be super serious with GT5, but later on in GT5, I do more racing. A bit of that's documented, or special techniques and stuff, and that you can take my driving as you may. I'd say by the end of GT5, I was slightly above average, but that was also using it the best car possible with the best tune possible and stuff like that. So maybe slightly above average with the actual best possible, but if everybody was in a one make race, depending on the track obviously, but on average I would be under average if everyone's in a one make race, so that still wasn't the dandiest. By GT6 though, I mean that's when I really started to focus in more, because by GT6 was actually again when my parents were more on board for me to actually put in more hours and stuff. I mean, I told this in the life story video. And I mean, for the most part, I wasn't even really allowed to play video games more than like a few hours a night on the weekends or over summer vacation, a few hours per day, night, whatever. And so that ended up probably calculating to 4 hours a week during school and like 14 or so during a week during summer vacation. So, I mean, obviously I got better with more practice and such like that around about 2013-ish. And that helped. Well, practice makes permanent, not really perfect. But the main reason I was more focused with GT6 is because I realized, too, that there was actually starting to be a market to try and do as good as possible with Gran Turismo. Like, Gran Turismo was the best out there for publicity of being fast, and that happened to be the one that I was the best at, so that was a good combination right there. Starting 2014, I did push more to be good on Drive Club too, and arguably you could still say that overall I was better at Drive Club than I was in Gran Turismo, and there's documented stuff on there too, and there's a genuine argument to make for that, but Drive Club just kind of happened if I played the game enough because it looked pretty that I happened to get good at it. So again, that doesn't really correlate completely, but you can still sort of make that argument that I was actually better at Drive Club than any particular Gran Turismo on average, but whatever. For Gran Turismo, though, with GT6, I honed it. One of the very first time trials of GT6, there was 550 performance point at Brands Hatch Indy, I think is what it was. And it didn't end up being the meta car at the time, but I pre-ordered it, so I got it for free. And one of the very best cars for it, and still ended up pretty good as the game went on, was the Audi Quattro rally car. The one, if you pre-ordered it, it got the 15th anniversary skin on it from the 80s. And I used that, and like, again, it was pretty early on. I can't remember exact time, but like the very first lap I put in, I was already like 81st in the world. Again, it was pretty early on in a time trial, but noticing of the very first lap that I did, and I was already 81st, and I remember even the ranking exactly and such, that gave me motivation to continue and stuff, and that's really when I honed into that. As I said already, I was kind of more honed into the glitchy drifting aspect of it and stuff, but that was kind of one that opened my eyes of, oh, I can actually do some time trials and such as well. So then after that, not too long after, I started getting actually the more racing leagues and such. My internet sucked at the time, like even more than it does now. My internet still ain't the dandiest now. But nonetheless, by 2014 or so, I started to try some league stuff, mostly via GT Planet, seeing it and such. I did American Legion of Verm was one of the first ones I did. Just a Carol Power and I specialtated that one-off event. And then not long after that, a lot of the people that I raced with in Dirty Rooms tried their own clean thing of the extremely fun endurance league, and there are some clips of that on the channel as well. And lo and behold, that went from like late 2014 to early 2015, and I actually won that championship. I won the Extremely Fun Endurance League Champions. Granted, that doesn't sound like too much without saying specifics, but one of the specifics is driver in that was my teammate who was always, like, from the very beginning, better than me, is now of Card Chan 3, who, granted, from what I remember, didn't race the entire schedule, and I think who actually did points, figured out that he had the best finish, so if he would have raced the entire schedule, probably would have won the championship, but still, nonetheless, like, he's a downright world-class driver, like, borderline even making the Gran Turismo events and stuff, like in that final GT Sport race was like seventh, and passed me real quick with almost no practice whatsoever, and ended up only like 10 seconds off of what Igor Frogger was running in like a 18-ish minute race, I think it was. Only like 10 seconds off Igor Fraga. So, yeah. And I beat him. There was ERU Fan 97, JK Racing, who were on the other rival team, and discuss that more DRL, but DRL doesn't really correlate as much because of Dirty League. That team wasn't necessarily run left, but they definitely did work with each other. And there's quite a few other miscellaneous drivers who may have not done the full schedule who were quite fast too. ET Top 100 was there. Our Contender was there. Later on, actually, in DRL, we got the best driver, literally, in terms of the overall rankings of total XP gain. The best driver in Drive Club history, Vinny Tyser, or something. You can look that up. There's videos in there, too. I can't remember exactly how it's spelled, but it's something along the lines of Vinny Tyser. Later on, and I'd actually be right on par with literally the best driver in Drive Club history. Granted, the best driver in Drive Club history playing Gran Turismo, but still, I'd be right on par and even sometimes faster than that driver, so that's saying something right there, I guess. So yeah, that ended up giving me a lot of confidence, and you could argue some cockiness in there too. But yeah, by then, 2015, I had full confidence. I actually sort of knew what I was doing. So 2015, clean stuff. 2016 was kind of more focused on DRL and continuing the YouTube channel back when YouTube was still fairly decent. So it was more dirty racing and such. A little bit of clean miscellaneous in there. I did the GT Planet karting series, but that series didn't really work out to the fullest extent. There were really only two full-time teams there, Team Mopar and Makosi, I don't really know how that's pronounced, but where there were only two teams, they didn't really bother with team standings, so technically speaking, Team Mopar won the Constructors' Cup, or however you want to word that, the team championship, because they just didn't even really bother with the standings, where there were only two total. So we definitely didn't lose, I'll put it that way. And Cards ran that, and again was a bit faster on average, but that league only ran for like 2 seasons or something. There were quite a few people that did it, but it was confusing of the points, and the GT servers didn't really do too well with cards, so it just ended up kind of awkward and stuff. But mainly, it kind of was dirty racing. So to 2017, that's really kind of when it all kicked off, because that's when the Gran Turismo Sport closed beta came out. And obviously, I was really motivated for that one because I was one of the few who got lucky enough to get into the closed beta itself. I think it ended up being found that there were around 10,000 people in the entire world that got into the closed beta, and some of those other big names that got into closed beta, ERU Fan 97, who already said it was pretty much on par with them as it was the whole time. GTR. I'm trying to remember exactly, but he has a YouTube channel. I can't really remember his name. GTR, who was in GT Academy and finished real high up in there, who I raced with a whole heck of a heap, especially in the closed beta. Z28 Gaming, who definitely has a YouTube channel. Both GTR and Z28 were in the Clean and Fast club. They were like the original members of that. And Igor Fraga, like arguably the best driver in Gran Turismo history. There was a race, and it's documented. I've talked about this anytime I'm bringing up. I'm talking about this, so you probably know where I'm going with it, because I've brought that up anytime it makes even remote sense too. There's a race in GT Sport Closed Beta when Igor Fraga was in the Lotus, which doesn't even exist anymore, Lotus Evora, and he didn't practice whatsoever, and at that point I already practiced for like 800 miles or something. I had like the second fastest qualifying time in all of the Americas region. First was GTR, and I was not remotely close to him. He ran away with it. But Igor Fraga, with no qualifying time in a different car that almost no one else was using, I beat Igor Fraga, arguably the Gran Turismo greatest driver of all time, by about one car length in a 6-minute race when he had to go through traffic. Started 6 positions lower than me, and I beat him by about probably half a car length, I think is what it ended up being. But nonetheless, I can still say, and it's absolutely proven, and it's specified on and all that yes, folks, in mid-2017, I beat the greatest driver in Gran Turismo history, arguably. Granted, at that time, he wasn't really considered that, but he was already shown as definitely the potential to be by that point. So yeah, there's that. And I mean, really, 2017 onwards, pretty well documented. I mean, even in the closed beta, I managed to get to A driver rating, and there was only 3 races a day. Not 3 races available, literally just 3 races ran a day in that closed beta, except for a very few circumstances, last few days it was out, and then on extremely rare circumstances there were more too, but on average it was 3 a day, and I still got the A. Again, it was only 10,000 in the world, so let's say 3-ish thousand for America's region, but still. I mean, the rest is pretty well documented there. I mean, by early 2018, I was easily A+. Is in early 2018, this is also very much well documented too, is I won the Manufacturers Cup for Dodge in one of the exhibition seasons, to be fair. It was an exhibition season. But in January 2018, I did win Manufacturers Cup for Dodge. I finished 24th in total. Granted, I've seen some people finish a lot better than 24th. I've seen some people win it for Dodge and finish a lot worse. So I'm not going to say if I downright comparative now or whatever, how good that individual season was to what is on average. It seemed like at the time the competition was actually kind of lower. Like quite a few times before, there were people finishing a lot better than 24th in running odds. But in the grand scheme of things, there's people who finished worse when still won the cup. There's people that finished better. So I'll just put it like that. The things really worked out well, the best track combination possible, other than Tokyo Expressway Central Adelaide. That I know of, that's never even been in a manufacturer's go. Like, other than that, that was actually the best possible combination. And really, it's not even the manufacturers that theoretically I would do best at. Because in Nason, sometimes there's tuning, and I'm figure out tuning and such. And there would be a chance of getting some kart races in Nason's too, and better with the karts and such. So theoretically, at my very best, I'd actually do better in the Nasons and the manufacturers of the overall ranking. But I mean, winning that for Dodge, that's solidified. Really, I would say by maybe 3 months into GT Sport Closed Beta onward, and ran about to the peak of my abilities on average. Of course, I got better of individual tracks, and I figured out miscellaneous per like physics update and performance point update with GT7 ways with the tuning and performance point, like little niche things I could do given the time period and such. I mean, even from 2018, I kind of do individual short of kind of challenge type things, like try to get world record at Tokyo Expressway Center Adelaide Circuit Experience. Back then, you could touch the walls. Now, even if it's equivalent of an at landing on your car, you can't even touch the walls anymore. And I'm just not that precise at all. I mean, that still kind of goes back to the very beginning of it. I can't really see the difference of an inch away from the wall and hitting the wall itself. So, I mean, I just can't see good enough to do the entire legitimately fast lap without touching the wall whatsoever. I bet the closest I ever got to that was actually Tokyo Expressway East, the one with the giant straightaway, with the 345 horsepower, 2,205 pound road car event. The one that I had an almost an hour of footage and the Decades Challenge and all that for. That one you couldn't nudge a wall either, and I managed to actually finish 10th in the world for that, but that's because it was a tuning race where people needed to spend a whole heck of a heap of money tuning a car that cost a whole heck of a heap of money. So not a lot of really people bothered doing that. So I mean, that helped too. I'd say realistically, if that was like a one make thing, I probably wouldn't have even been in the top 100. And that was with probably of an individual week that was the most driving that I did of any week ever, literally. I'm pretty sure of that. Granted, I was driving a whole heck of a heap of different cars. It wasn't at just Enzo that I set the time with, but still, if it's one of those things that you can't even touch a wall for, I'm not going to realistically do good on that unless there is some kind of extenuating circumstance like what happened in that individual event. That kind of just goes down to literal sight thing. But also, somewhat of a sight thing, more of reflexes type thing too. Sight kind of goes into the reflexes, I guess, too. Is reaction time. Honestly, unless I have a whole heck of a heap of practice, which I am okay with doing, especially now that this is my quote-unquote career, and I'll practice a whole heck of a heap if needed. Unless I have a whole heck of a heap of practice, I don't really feel too confident racing. Like, sometimes it goes fine. Like, there are some clips early in the week with some weekly races where occasionally it works. But unless I have a whole heck of a heap of practice, I don't really feel too good about running events. And, I mean, that's kind of more to muscle memory type thing. Sight thing again, I can't really do for like the braking zones to look off in the distance for marker. I like the GT6 version when it would just be that racing line right in front of you and you could see the red and you could judge it for that. The GT7 version's okay where it has that braking, the red thing, and it has the lines and such, but it's not really the absolute dandiest. The best version of it to me was GT6. I wish they bring that back as an option. Maybe not that the main and the only thing, but at least an option to have that racing line that GT6 had for it. That's the one that I felt the most comfortable using. I just don't really have the eyesight to really look off in the distance. If it's one that I'm literally right next to and it's a board with the how close it is to the turn itself on it, like the 50-100 type board that's literally right next to me when I'm braking. Sure, I can judge from that. But if it did anything off the distance more than, say, 10-15 feet or whatever, I'm not realistically going to be able to use that. So I have to practice a whole heck of a lot to get muscle memory. Again, occasionally it kind of works out. Like there are clips early in the week of me doing weekly races and stuff like that. But if it's a Nason's Manufacturers Cup where there's quite a few days in between events, I'm never going to go into one of those races with no practice. Granted, again, I don't have the PlayStation Plus now because I got the deal from 9 years ago and they cut that off because they didn't want me getting a 9-year-old deal anymore, which is not in that. So for the foreseeable future, I wouldn't be racing anyway. I mean, the game is far from the dandiest right now anyway. But I mean, all in all, yeah, that's the overall challenge is that I can't give specifics of how it relates to someone with the average. I guess 2020 is the average. I guess that's how that works. Eyesight. Again, I don't even know if 2020 is necessarily the average. I'm going to assume it is. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. Because cerebral palsy is always the same eyesight. I've never had better, I've never had worse. Theoretically, I guess the glasses technology could improve over the years, but even with glasses from when I was a kid, it was 20/240. From the last pair of glasses that I got, it was 20/240. I mean, realistically, it's going to be about the same for now with the actual glasses themselves. I mean, maybe chip or robot or whatever. In the future, who knows? But I mean, for now, it's glasses technology. But anyway, yeah, I mean, reflexes, which has a little bit to do with sight, are an issue of the actual racing itself, of the muscle memory and feeling confident racing against each other. The sight definitely affects your braking and stuff, but I mean, overall, it's confidence thing. To end off the video, just a general thing of being legally blind and not the best balance in walking anyway. Like if I walk for more than even just 2 or 3 minutes at a time, I'm already hurting quite a bit. I mean, I can force myself to do it. I mean, back when I was in better shape and all that, I could force myself and I hated doing it. But I mean, in scouts and stuff, I could do 10-mile hikes and stuff. I hated within the last 9.5 miles of doing it, but I could do it. Like going to a NASCAR race, if I get lucky enough to do that, I'll do the walking for that because watching the racing itself is worth doing it. But I mean, it's one of those risk versus reward, play through the pain type thing. I mean, even just sitting in a chair during races, I mean, they say to stretch every hour and stuff, but I mean, even a little bit of that, if I do more than track, obviously average out to different car track combinations, say like 300 miles or something, I'm sore the next day. And play through the pain, sometimes it's worth it and all that. But I mean, yeah, that's not the dandiest. And I mean, that also kind of goes to endurance thing. Rarely ever does an endurance thing actually get you anywhere. In Gran Turismo, in terms of true competitiveness, about the longest races that ever actually matter the most are like an hour. I can do an hour race, whatever, that's fine. But realistically, I don't think I could do more than like a 3-hour endurance and feel confident about it. I mean, maybe I could force myself to do it longer, but I wouldn't be able to be up to the pace or just the confidence of it. If I happen to get around another car later on, I wouldn't feel too good about it and all that. I mean, again, sometimes it does just happen to work out okay. I still wouldn't really feel too good in the situation. Yeah, the point that I'm making is between all that, I suck at almost everything. Like, of just every day-to-day task, I suck at almost everything. And I've realized that since I was a little kid, really. I mean, it's not news to me or a recent revelation or anything like that. Of just any day-to-day thing, I'm going to be worse off than probably 80 to 90% of people doing it. Some day-to-day things I can't even really do at all. You can take that as you may. But yeah, I mean, I'll just say straightforward. There's some day-to-day things I can't even really do at all. No matter how hard I try and all that, I mean, it's just not going to work out. And sometimes in certain just safety, whether it's short or long term, it's best that I don't really try that kind of stuff. Again, you can take it as you may of what it is. That's not necessarily important for the video. Well, I mean, overall, I've kind of discussed this previous videos without downright saying cerebral palsy. It's nice to have confidence that I'm actually good at something. I've said this before too, and especially after revealing cerebral palsy. Gran Turismo and everything in my life, other than maybe sleeping, take that as you may too. I can sleep more hours a day than the average person. That's like an energy thing. Cerebral palsy uses more energy because the muscles work harder to do things, so I can just naturally sleep longer than people. Other than I can sleep more hours a day than the average person, probably the best thing that I am at of anything in the world is Gran Turismo. Of course, car and track combination matters for that too. I'm not the Danish. At Nürburgring, I'm not all that good with the high-powered rear-wheel drive cars, that sort of thing. The slower the car on average, the better I'm going to be with it and such, and better with tuned cars than with the balance of performance or on stock, that sort of thing. But on average, yeah, the thing in all the world that I'm best at is Gran Turismo. You can take that as you may, but I have well over 20 years of experience playing it now. Granted, it's really only about the last 10 or so that I had true confidence in playing it, but, I mean, I guess it worked out. I mean, all in all, as I said, this is what I'd want to do more than any other realistic pathway that I could have taken my life. As I said before, you can definitely take that as you may, but I don't see any other realistic way my life could have gone where I'd be in a better situation than I am now. And this is far from the Danish the situations, but it could be a whole heck of a heap worse too. And I'm willing to admit that and have in that aspect for a while. But I mean, yeah, it's just nice actually being good at something. Overall, that's kind of been the motivation, is that really from about the age of 10, give or take, Gran Turismo was one of the best things I was at, and probably by about 15, it was the best thing that I was good at. I mean, that's well over 10 years at this point, so that's something in and of itself. For probably the vast majority of the rest of my life, some iteration of racing game will be what I'm best at of anything in the world. Or I could just go back to previous Gran Turismo, or what would be a previous Gran Turismo at the time, and call that the best thing there. You could say the world records of circuit, in the old days, the circuit experiences, or now with the missions or whatever, kind of challenge type things. But realistically, that has a leaderboard. That's less of a challenge than an actual straightforward thing. A challenge is more of a thing that you as an individual are completing. Something with leaderboard is kind of just straightforward. You beat however many people you can on a leaderboard. Of the challenge thing of me as an individual, I think that's my ultimate thing. I don't have the endurance to do those 24-hour challenges, that's for sure. I don't want to pay the money for the PlayStation Network to do the 2A plus type challenge, but even if I still had it, the whole deal of it anyway, I wouldn't really see much of a point in doing that, because my bread and butter back in the day were the race A's. Because those are kind of a more niche and glitchy thing going back to, as I said in the beginning, it could be glitchy with tunes at some point, and then niche with the type of car and track combination type thing, so I could do that back in the day when I had driver and sportsmanship rating. Granted, play a whole heck of a heap more on my main account when it's not driver and sportsmanship rating, I'll admit that. But there would be no point in making another account and trying to go through it from E to however high up I could get now, because the races now that have driver and sportsmanship rating 95% of the time aren't really my bread and butter anyway. But yeah, I'm willing to admit that Gran Turismo is the thing I'm best at, and probably will be for the vast majority of the rest of my life. You can definitely take that as you may, but all things considered, it's the best situation I could be in realistically. And overall, that's my challenge. I know damn well I can't do one of those 24-hour type challenges. There's no point in me trying and eat whatever challenge because it wouldn't be nearly to the point of what I could do best in the past. Because what I was best at the past doesn't have driver and sportsmanship rating. So it wouldn't be showing what I'm actually best at. So it's kind of not a true showcase of myself as a whole, really, of trying a challenge like that. If y'all have ideas for challenges and stuff that I can do, leave it in the comments and I could try my best to do stuff like that. But ultimately, I've been thinking about it, and that's kind of like my main challenge. It's been a 20 plus year challenge, and I still haven't necessarily succeeded in a lot of ways, I'll admit that too. The ultimate success would be competing in the Paralympics. Yeah, that would be dandy, wouldn't it? Certainly very worth the yeehaw, wouldn't it? But it's probably be a while and a half before that. But I mean, yeah, that's my ultimate challenge of just going from terrible beginnings. I sucked at. I mean, it took me quite a few years to not suck at Gran Turismo, too, I'll admit that. It was really till GT5 that I didn't downright suck at Gran Turismo. Yeah, so I went from sucking at everything to sucking at almost everything in about a 20-year span, but I mean, whatever. At least I can confidently say I don't suck. You can take how good I am, but I can say that I don't suck on average at something, and that's better than what I've spent the majority of my life dealing with, so overall it's yeehaw and it's the best circumstance I could realistically be in, so yeah, that's the ultimate challenge. Me going from terrible to A plus by Legally Blind, and I did it. There was one race with extremely extenuating circumstances. I beat arguably the best driver in Gran Turismo history. I won the Manufacturers Cup for my favorite manufacturer. I've been able to do individual leaderboards type stuff, like win a circuit experience for one of the Physics Center Racing in GT Sport, and I currently be leading a mission in if this new physics update for GT7 and things like that. But I mean, overall, it's just nice to not suck at something. I know this probably doesn't relate to the average person. The average person is average. That's the point of average. There are very few things that I'm even average at. The vast majority of things I'm not even average at. So to actually be genuinely above average, again, you can take my true talent as you may, because again, I'll admit there's some car and track combinations I still suck at. But overall, I think I can say that I don't suck at Gran Turismo at this point in my life, and it's the best realistic circumstance I could be in, and it's worth a yeehaw.